I'm going to pass you over to Cara, Fiona and Dawn for this fantastic session, so thank you.
Thanks, Vicky. I will share our presentation for you, so just bear with me 1 second. Right, well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session on social work behind and beyond the gate. I do have 2 of the Prisons and MAPPA team with me today, so that's Dawn and Fiona. They're both social workers and they're here to present a few case studies which we hope will provide you with some insight into the work that we do and the challenges and rewards of working with this group. Fiona and Dawn, if you want to give everyone a quick wave. So my name's Cara Petch. Hello, Dawn. My name's Cara Petch and I'm the Service Manager for Learning Disability, Autism Prisons and MAPPA for East Riding of Yorkshire Adult Social Care. My previous role was within the locality team in which the prisons are situated and where responsibility for undertaking social care assessments sat prior to creation of this team. So the aim of this session is to introduce the role, purpose and origins of the team, to share our experiences, challenges, achievements and aims for the future. To do this, we'll talk about our responsibilities under the law, the creativity needed to meet these within an artificial and restrictive prison environment, our continued work beyond the gate with MAPPA offenders, and the journey we have taken to get to our current position, which leads us to the all-important question: why create a specialist prisons and MAPPA team? So prior to the development of the team, East Riding Social Care Prison Service was limited to 1 part-time worker, and that's Dawn. But she was based within the World's Community Wellbeing team, and this arrangement was due to the prisons being within the East Riding of Yorkshire Council boundaries and being within the World's area. The World's Community Wellbeing team is a generic adult social care team and was not able to offer Dawn any specialist support in navigating prison and probation systems and processes. The provision of the service was subject to multiple issues in engaging with the prisons. As mentioned earlier, there was only 1 part-time social worker. This resulted in provision being disjointed, unreliable, and when combined with the frequent changes in prison hierarchy, a real lack of knowledge and understanding of how to work together to achieve the duties assigned to both services under Chapter 3 of the Care Act 2014, near impossible to deliver. The Care Act places a duty on the local authority to assess and meet eligible needs of prisoners detained in their locality. Multiple attempts were made to engage with the prisons to achieve cohesive working and develop robust referral and assessment processes. However, despite our best endeavours, we achieved very limited success. So the first question to ask again is why? Why is this so difficult? What were the barriers to meeting these duties? Having 1 part-time staff member was a significant barrier. When this worker was absent, there was simply no prison service. Issues with the prison's vetting and clearance frustrated the role being allocated to another employee. Without full enhanced vetting clearance, access to the prison estate is restricted to just 3 times in a 12-month period. Staff rotation within the prisons themselves was and continues to be a significant barrier to cohesive working. We have found that good relationships can be quickly established, but just as quickly lost when key prison staff move on to a new role. New prison personnel usually come to the role with limited knowledge of social care in a prison setting and no knowledge of who we are, what we do, or why we're doing it. Combined with the above, this made the task of establishing a service feel impossible. Prisons officers and prisoners' mistrust of all things social work exacerbated the challenges in maintaining positive relationships, especially where safeguarding concerns were raised. Sadly, as we all know, the public and media perception of social work is not always positive. And so despite both prisons accommodating several hundred prisoners, referrals were limited and/or inappropriate. There was a lack of oversight of the service demand and in no small part an element of distrust from some prison workers. And so to resolve these issues and ensure that we're meeting our duties under the Care Act, the Prisons and MAPPA team were created in 2021. Hopefully, by the end of this presentation, we will have demonstrated how these issues have been addressed and how the team are achieving good practice and good outcomes for this cohort. So just a little bit of an oversight of who we are. So we have a part-time team manager called Julie Burrell. She is a qualified AMP and responsible for oversight of the Prisons and MAPPA team, as well as sharing responsibility for the AMP and out of hours specialist service. This breadth of mental health knowledge and experience enables the team manager to provide support and guidance in respect of prisoners at risk of detention under the Mental Health Act 1983 and or those experiencing mental ill health. The senior social worker, Cheryl Craven, who co-produced this presentation with me, has a background in criminal justice with extensive experience of working with offenders of all ages, police, probation and judiciary services. The senior social worker's knowledge and experience is helpful in supporting the team to navigate processes and understand the terminology widely used by offence-focused agencies. The full-time social worker, Fiona, who will be sharing a case study with you later, has extensive experience of forensic and mental health social work. She has experiential knowledge of working with offenders detained under mental health legislation. The part-time social worker, Dawn, who's also sharing a couple of case studies with you, is our most experienced practitioner within the team and most experienced in working with sentenced and MAPPA offenders. Her experience and knowledge of navigating prison systems and processes enabled the team to mobilise the service in a timely manner. The team also benefits from a full-time care coordinator, Hayley Grant. Hayley has over 20 years experience of care management and safeguarding and contributes to the team's matrix skill set with extensive knowledge and connections with the community services and safeguarding criteria and processes. But just to give you a little bit of an idea of where we are, the team have a base in County Hall in Beverley, which is here, and it's a lovely town for those who fancy a visit, but obviously that's not where our real business takes place. The majority of our work is undertaken within the two prisons located within the East Riding of Yorkshire boundary. So that's HMP's Humber, which, if I'm about right, is around here, and Full Sutton, which is here just on the boundary of East Riding. HMP Humber is a Category C resettlement prison based just outside the small village of Everthorpe. It currently has capacity for 1,062 prisoners, although plans are in development to increase capacity to accommodate an additional 120 people. This prison tends to have a high turnover of prisoners on shorter sentences, and approximately 100 prisoners are released or transferred per month. Category C prisoners are identified as prisoners who cannot be trusted in open conditions, but who are unlikely to attempt to escape. Some of these prisoners are coming to the end of lengthy sentences and are transferred to Humber in preparation for resettlement. HMP Full Sutton is a Category A prison, which is, as I said, is located at the edge of the East Riding. For those who are interested in geography, Full Sutton is 8 miles from the historic city of York, and it's just a short 20-minute drive. So if you fancy a visit, it's a nice area to come to. Category A prisoners are defined as prisoners who would be highly dangerous to the public if they were to escape, and as you would expect, tend to have lengthy sentences. Definitions taken from the PACT website, who are a voluntary sector organisation providing support to prisoners and their families. I expect that you might think that the categorisation of the prison impacts on how we work within the prisons. The only impact is the level of security. While staff may complete assessments in relative privacy with residents at Humber, this is not permitted in Full Sutton due to the high-risk residents detained there. All assessments in Full Sutton are conducted in the presence of at least one prison officer, whereas the arrangements in Humber are very different. Social workers are able to meet with the residents in the privacy of alarmed treatment rooms or if accompanied by an escort within the resident's cell. There are obviously challenges when unpicking an individual's narrative with an audience, and the relationship of the prison officer and prisoner is often felt as oppressive by the residents. Nevertheless, the amount of rich information obtained by the team during assessment meetings highlights their skills as practitioners and their ability to quickly build a rapport with a suspicious and often resistant group. Our duties under the Care Act remain the same wherever the person is located and whatever their offence. The prisons team regularly visit both prisons to complete care and support assessments, and from these assessments they will formulate a care plan and commission care services to meet eligible need. I'll talk about how we do that later. Despite opposition from nearly 3,000 people, including police, a 1,500 bed male Category C resettlement prison is being built alongside the existing maximum security prison at HMP Full Sutton. This is billed as the UK's first all-electric jail, and the site will be powered by solar panels and heat pump technology. The government has said construction work will create 600 jobs, with the prisons set to initially open in 2025. However, I can confirm that the foundations are laid, and it is envisaged that the first prisoner will be arriving sometime in 2024, so we need to be ready for that. We've yet to understand what the implication of this will be on the prisons and MAPPA service and on the wider community. We do need to be mindful that the prison will bring increased traffic, visitors, and place additional pressure on health services, including hospitals and GPs, increased demand for housing and education. But on a positive note, the new prison is likely to bring employment and regeneration opportunities. So what do we do? The aim of the team is to provide parity of experience for serving prisoners with eligible social care need to service users residing in the community who are under MAPPA arrangements. The team work cohesively with probation to prepare for parole hearings and support release planning. And a key aspect of the team's role is to maintain effective care and support arrangements for all of these cohorts. The Care Act provision is a response to the ageing populations in prison, especially for those individuals who are serving long sentences who may develop eligible needs whilst in custody and those sentenced later in life for historic offence. Age is a key factor in understanding the need for health and social care in prisons. Older prisoners are the fastest growing group in the prison population, and the number of prisoners aged 60 or over has increased by 82% in the last decade and by 243% since 2002. There is no universally accepted definition of old age in the prisons. Age thresholds used by different organisations vary widely, from 45 to over 70. In England and Wales, the age of 50 has been adopted by His Majesty's Prison and Probation Service, insofar as the age of prisoners is recognised for operational purposes. The definition is lower than what is usually considered old age in the general population. Several submissions explain that this definition of old age in prisons is based on evidence that health-related needs of prisoners are advanced by around 10 years relative to the people in the general population. For example, a 50-year-old prisoner could have the healthcare needs typically associated with a 60-year-old person in the community. As you may expect, we tend to have more older prisoners in Full Sutton than in Humber, and as a result, we do see a greater representation of age-related health conditions and long-term impact of lifelong conditions. We also see and work with individuals experiencing short-term need who are expected to recover following a period of ill health or recovery from an event. Simply put, we provide assessment and care and support planning to meet eligible needs for individuals living at His Majesty's pleasure and support MAPPA and subject to MAPPA support and supervision. The team are non-judgmental in their approach to working with this group of service users. Bringing core social work values to the service, the team do not discriminate. Sadly, this is not an ethos that's reflected within some community services, and we find for people outside of social work, it can be a real test in regard to understanding the moral and ethical implications of our work. A small sample of comments from community services that have been said directly to me: how can you work with these kind of people? They should be left to rot. Why should they get help? And even questioning what kind of a person that I am, that I would choose to work with them. Whilst it's acknowledged that fear and lack of understanding are motivators for some of the attitudes, it cannot be ignored that our client group are people with vulnerabilities. They need support to manage their daily lives. They are fathers, brothers, sons, daughters, mothers and sisters. It's not our place to judge. This is being done by the courts and in some cases a jury of their peers. Our role is to uphold social work values and ethics and see the person behind the offence. So how do we do it? We work in partnership with prison healthcare providers. This works as we have an agreement in respect between the East Riding of Yorkshire Council, the prisons and Spectrum, who are the healthcare provider for both prisons. This is contained within a memorandum of understanding which details the roles and responsibilities of each party. Currently, the contract arrangements include funding of 37 hours support each week in each prison to enable eligible care and support needs to be met. The contract is currently under review, and we will be adopting a piecework approach to commission each care package as a separate entity whilst remaining within the boundaries of our budget. It's not within our delegation to appoint a health and/or social care provider in the prisons. This is arranged via a tendering process by the prisons and the Ministry of Justice. We are then required to work with the successful provider Unlike community-based service users, serving prisoners are unable to access a direct payment option under the Care Act, and furthermore, due to the security and clearance issues, it's not possible to enable provider choice in the same way as we would in the community. Where the prisoner does have choice is either to decline or accept referral for assessment, or to decline or accept service provision. This does lead to the question of what happens where a person is assessed as lacking capacity in regards to the care and support arrangements, or if declining places them or others at significant risk of harm. For MAPPA offenders, we can and do implement the VAM, which is a vulnerable adult risk management process. This supports identification of risks, both to ensure the person is making an informed decision regarding the risk and to make all attempts to support the person to work with us effectively to manage and hopefully reduce risk of harm. Unfortunately, this is a community policy and does not translate to custodial settings. However, HUMBA do have regular safer interventions meetings to manage risk, and more generally, the persistence and person-centred approaches and provision of clear information and support the staff team to work creatively with the person. With regards to capacity, a serving prisoner can be assessed under the Mental Capacity Act 2005 and supported via best interests in exactly the same way as a community-based service user. Obviously, there are some limitations. We cannot make decisions about where a person is going to reside, but we are able to support with decisions regarding care and support within the prison and/or care and residence once the person is released from the prison setting. As with Community Mental Capacity Act, we would involve all the relevant persons and ensure that the decision maker was the expert in that area, for instance, a dentist for dental care. Safeguarding within the prisons is dealt with internally. The team are proactive in supporting both prisons to ensure safeguarding concerns are dealt with appropriately and expeditiously. This is an ongoing piece of work. East Riding of Yorkshire Development and Implementation Officers are currently reviewing safeguarding in prisons to see what can be done to support best practice. The team assess and prepare assessments for consideration at parole hearings. Parole panels will not consider release plans without accommodation provision in place. The team work closely with both prison offender managers and community offender managers to develop safe and appropriate release plans. This is a challenging aspect of prison social work due to difficulties in securing care and support for MAPPA offenders. Additionally, difficulties arise when an ex-offender is directed to reside in approved premises, as this type of accommodation cannot usually accommodate professional carers, adaptations on site, or manage significant challenging behaviours which can manifest in ex-offenders with learning disability, personality disorder, or neurodiversity. The team work with community services to secure appropriate support following release for people who will be subject to MAPPA arrangements. There is a duty on adult social care to cooperate with MAPPA and to ensure representation at the monthly MAPPA meetings, participate in the multi-agency planning of support, care and supervision of MAPPA offenders. As the service manager, I attend the MAPPA meetings as a local authority representative, with the senior social worker deputising in my absence. MAPPA meetings provide opportunity for multi-agency working to support safe release of offenders who are deemed to continue to pose a risk to the public. The MAPPA panel have the power to instruct services to undertake pieces of work within their remit and support clear oversight across all agencies of the MAPPA plan and the approach to integrated support. Financial assessment. Now, this is a real challenge due to the issues in terms of gaining access to the prison. It's not practical for our welfare rights officers to visit to complete financial assessments, and prisoners are unlikely to have access to their financial data. It's likely that benefits have been suspended, meaning that they will have no income. Financial assessments are still required, and these are kept very simple with a basic declaration of their current financial situation. As I'm sure you can imagine, the lack of access to funds causes greater challenge when the person is released than whilst detained. Benefits need to be reinstated, applied for, and often emergency funds are required to support the person to purchase food and basic items to get them through the first few days. This is supported via probation services for those that are released on probation, but not everyone is. There are grants available to support with this, and once the person is in the community, we can refer to welfare rights to request support with benefits. Advocacy within the prison is again very challenging. Voiceability are the advocacy provider for East Riding, but much the same as welfare rights and other visitors, access to the prison creates challenges. HMP Humber do have a neurodiversity support manager that we can call on for support, but clearly this is not ideal, and this is an area that requires further development moving forward. And of course, we can't forget reviews. Again, as with the community work, we are required to complete reviews of prison social care. Simply put, all the actions and responsibilities that we have under the Care Act are exactly the same as for those in the prisons as they are for those in the community. We just have to be a little bit more creative and work within the limitations of the prison regime to achieve the outcomes. We are as strengths-based and outcome and solution focused when completing assessments. We work hard to try and preserve the person's dignity and to fight and uphold their human rights in the same way as we would for any person. So what is MAPPA? It's the Multi-Agency Public Protection Arrangements, commonly known as MAPPA. These are a national set of arrangements to manage the risk posed by sexual, violent, potentially dangerous and/or high-profile offenders. These offenders must have received a sentence of at least 12 months to be eligible for MAPPA referral. All prisons and MAPPA team community clients are MAPPA offenders, so it's reasonable to determine that we work with some level of risk. As you can see on the slide, there are 3 levels of MAPPA supervision and support to provide the appropriate level of risk management at each level. The prisons and MAPPA team have a comprehensive understanding of the static and dynamic risk factors used to determine an individual's risk to self, to others and from others. This helps the team to formulate, in partnership with other agencies, a comprehensive and robust risk assessment within a care or within a care setting or a domiciliary care provision. I have included a reference on the last slide for anyone who's interested in learning about MAPPA, and I have included reference on the final slide as well for people who are interested in learning a little bit more. I thought it might be helpful to share with you some of the team statistics which do evidence the positive impact of the development of the team on people in prisons requiring assessment and support to meet need. This first graph highlights the significant increase in referrals from HMP Humber following the team inception in July 2021. Whilst COVID is likely to have impacted the referrals in the 2021 period, the graph would suggest that referral numbers were very low pre-COVID in 2018 and 19, which was in no small part due to the issues that I spoke about at the beginning of this session, and in turn evidences the success of the team in building and maintaining positive relationships. HMP Humber operate an informal and non-personal care buddy system. The prison are in process of exploring formalisation of this arrangement, so participating carers are rewarded with full training and a qualification. I'm going to change this bit up a bit, so bear with me, because what it did say is that we're in progress with a business case to support joint funding, but that has been approved, and I'm just starting conversations with the prison to look how we move the introduction of that scheme forward. I'll throw myself off completely now. So this second graph provides the date for HMP Full Sutton. Referrals are often for older individuals who are beginning to experience mobility and cognitive issues. However, we have received referrals for younger prisoners experiencing mental health issues, impacting on their well-being, and long-term prisoners who are being considered for parole. Full Sutton referrals, as you can see, have been relatively consistent since 2018, and this is likely attributed to the good relationship between the prison and adult social care staff and the stability of healthcare staffing in Full Sutton. Full Sutton appear to benefit from a very low healthcare staff turnover. Therefore, they benefit from long-term knowledge and experience of adult social care in custody and are able to identify and confidently make referrals. Furthermore, Full Sutton also benefits from a healthcare wing and a better place to provide care for prisoners with care needs. Full Sutton also operates a formal buddy system whereby specially trained prisoners provide non-personal care and support in return for a small financial remuneration. These care arrangements are monitored by the prison, and although it is a very effective system, it's something that we do need to develop greater oversight of, because obviously an eligible care need is an eligible care need, even if it's not met through formal care provision. And now I'd like to hand you over to my colleague Dawn, who is going to talk to you about one of her cases. Over to you, Dawn.
Thanks, Cara. Good afternoon, everyone. The service user in case study A was incarcerated in an out-of-area prison and, as the slide stated, had been assessed by a trusted assessor who did not identify any eligible needs. The referral came in from a community offender manager who had worked previously with the service user and understood his struggles living in the community independently, and was able to provide an insight to the issues he experienced previously trying to live independently, which was invaluable background information. Prior to his illness and offending behaviour, the service user had a partner and has 2 children. He split with his partner approximately 14 years ago and has not had any contact with his children in the past 2 years. The service user has an underlying health issue which required further investigation. The service user was thought to have either had some kind of brain injury, trauma, or stroke. He presented unkempt and at time of assessment had shaved off half of his beard and his hair. The assessment due to COVID was time limiting and the service user was reluctant to talk and gave one-word answers. I noticed he kept turning his head from side to side, talking and laughing to his shoulders, and was fixated on unseen images on the wall. After a lot of rapport building and encouragement, the service user did confide he was hearing voices and seeing things. When the service user was released, he was placed in temporary accommodation in an unfurnished flat with only a bed in place until a residential placement could be found, which would accommodate his needs and be able to manage the risk caused through his offending behaviour. He had 2 sets of clothes and no other possessions. Several charities were contacted and furniture was sourced along with some clothing. This helped mould good working relationships with the charities. Unfortunately, no home care support could be found due to the risk posed to carers, and no care providers were willing to accept the risk. The service user was regularly supported by the community offender manager, who supported him with provisions, finding food banks, and ensuring his safety and the safety of the general public. The service user did not have the ability to maintain a tenancy without support. Working with multi-agencies helped create the necessary risk assessments and support plans to enable a residential placement to be found who could accept the service user and support the home to provide a safe environment for the service user, staff, and other residents. The service user has index offences of sexual assault and is identified as a risk to women and children. For the service users to go into residential care, it was agreed for an initial 4-week assessment period with an in-depth exit plan in case the placement broke down and he could return back to his accommodation and would not become homeless. With support from health colleagues, he was able to be registered with a GP and information was identified he had previously undergone surgery to have fluid drained from his brain due to encephalitis. The service user had been advised this would not have any long-lasting effects. As he is now registered with a GP and due to his presentation and concerns around his cognitive thought processes, coordination and facial droop, a brain scan was undertaken and a horse-shaped mark found on his brain. Encephalitis common complications include memory loss, frequent seizures or fits, personality and behavioural changes, problems with attention, concentration, planning and problem solving, and persistent tiredness. These problems can have a significant impact on the life of the affected person as well as their family and friends. The service user presents with most of these complications. The health issues are still under investigations and he is waiting for the brain scan results to be examined by the consultant. The service user had other issues to be addressed, which included a gambling addiction, drinking addiction, rent arrears, sanctions placed on his benefits, and rent arrears on a previous property whilst in prison. And an in-depth risk assessment has been devised with support of all agencies, which is also an ongoing working document and is changeable with need. The service user is thriving in his new accommodation, and future plans are being set for him to be able to progress within the residential setting. He does have issues with gambling and has joined the Gambling Anonymous. The residential home is supporting the service user with his benefits and sanctions have now been lifted and his benefits reinstated. I wrote to the rents department who have also submitted the rent arrears to be written off. The residential home has supported the service users to purchase clothing and have built on his confidence and interaction with other residents in an appropriate manner. Today, the service user is still under MAPPA 2 restrictions. He is no longer under community offender management supervision. Mossavo are now the lead for the supervision within MAPPA. Professionals meetings are undertaken every 2 months and MAPPA meetings on a regular basis. The multi-agency working has improved the service user outcomes and hopefully will give the right support to prevent further reoffending and help identify the underlying health condition that could be a contributing factor to his offending behaviour. Over to you, Fiona.
Well, thank you, Dawn. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to speak to you about the service user referred to in case study B. He's a gentleman who's been known to many local services for several years, including alcohol service, the AMP team, community mental health services, environmental health services, adult social care, and the police and the probation services. He came to our attention through a MAPPA meeting following concerns from the probation and police about his inability to engage with community support services and to abide by his licence conditions. This was due largely to his excessive alcohol consumption, chronic memory issues, and a diagnosis of schizophrenia. The service user has no family contact and no meaningful relationships with others. This is largely due to his aggressive behaviour, which manifests itself when he's under the influence of alcohol. He had been evicted from his own property, which he had shared with his mother up until the time of her death. This was due to the state of repair it was in, and when environmental health got involved. And also he'd been lighting fires within the property in his home on top of live gas pipes. There were also ongoing issues with one of his neighbours whom he believed had stolen money from him, and he was paranoid that she was setting him up with the police. This relationship escalated, and during an argument in her front garden, the service user exposed himself to her, and as a result of this, he was placed on the sex offenders register and allocated a Moscow police officer to work with. He was assessed by the AMP team due to him presenting with auditory hallucinations and challenging behaviours, and he was detained under Section 3 of the Mental Health Act 1983 and spent time on a psychiatric unit for a period of assessment and treatment. When he was released from the unit, he then secured accommodation in a supported hostel, but soon was evicted from here due to issues including smoking in his room, setting fires in his room, excessive alcohol consumption, and due to sexually inappropriate behaviour and verbally towards female staff and other residents. Now homeless and due to his inability to attend police and probation appointments and regular breaches of his licence, he was caught in a cycle of leaving prison, becoming intoxicated immediately, breaching his licence conditions and ending up back in hospital with no recollection of how he had got there, or appearing in court and then returning to prison. I had made arrangements on a few occasions to meet with the service user to be able to assess him. Unfortunately, due to the chaotic lifestyle that was leading at the time, these didn't materialise. As this was the case, it was agreed that I would be able to visit a neighbouring prison to be able to assess him in there, with the view to assess him, hopefully find a place and get some support in place before he was released from prison. I was supported with the social work team from that prison to gain access to the prison and to be able to assess the service user. So following the assessment, there was a placement identified at a special residential care home, supporting people with substance misuse issues and mental health issues. They visited the service user in the prison and were able to assess him, and a bed was secured for him. The service user was picked up from the prison following his release and taken directly to the out of area residential care home, where he remains to this day. Excuse me. The accommodation, he was taken directly to the home, from by the Moscow office. Since he's been in the home, he's now had a diagnosis of Korsakoff syndrome. He's been assessed by the best interest assessor and is now placed under a DOLS. He's engaging with the mental health services and the local substance abuse services, and he's had a visit from the welfare rights team. They've assessed him, and a corporate appointee has been put in place to manage his finances. He has settled in well to the home. He's eating well. He's taking care of his personal hygiene. There have been a couple of incidents due to his fixation with alcohol and still experience cravings, but the staff have been able to manage that very well. There've been no more court appearances, no more prison sentences since he's been at the home. In a couple of weeks' time, it will be his yearly review, and in next month he will no longer be subject to his probation's licence. At this stage, Mosvo will take the lead, and we will co-work with all the other agencies involved, and that has continued throughout his placement there, and it will continue as his placement progresses. Thank you, and that's mine. Thank you very much, and I'll hand back over to Dawn again now for case study C. Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona. Right, case study C. From the slide, you will see this service user has a number of issues, including physical disabilities, learning disabilities, and mental health issues. The service user sustained an acquired brain injury following a fall down the stairs, which resulted in impaired cognitive function. He is determined to have eligible care and support needs. The service user recognises he requires care and support to maintain his well-being and safety, and he is able to make decisions about everyday choices such as what he wants to eat and what he'd like to wear. However, the deficit in his consequential thinking skills, impaired cognition, and poor memory impacts his ability to live independently. Prior to sentencing, the service user was well known to our adult services. Following a period of homelessness, the service user was initially assessed and placed in residential care in 2014. The service user received a custodial sentence in 2019 for historic sexual offences. He served approximately 2.5 years in custody and was released in May 2022. The service user served his sentence in an out-of-area prison. He was assessed in custody by the responsible local authority, who shared their assessment to assist with release planning. Within the assessment, the service user had voiced consideration of settling in his childhood town. However, he had no established connections with this locality, nor was he committed to moving. The prison and MAPPA team received a referral from the probation services in January 2022. Reviewing the case notes of the service user's care history, the prison and MAPPA team immediately began looking for an appropriate residential accommodation within the local area, as this was established as his ordinary residency. Applying a multi-agency approach to information sharing and risk management, the team shared the service user's offending history with care and accommodation providers. The service user is identified as a risk to both male and female children and vulnerable adults. Unfortunately, his risks deterred a number of providers local to the area who felt unable or perhaps unwilling to consider a placement or assessing him. The prison and MAPPA team contacted approximately 70 providers and were declined before extending the search beyond local boundaries. As the release date drew nearer, the team were successful in securing a temporary placement out of area, and the service user was transported directly to this accommodation upon release. The service user was released from custody with very limited belongings. He did, however, have a cheque for a large amount of money. The service user was assessed as lacking capacity in respect of his financial matters, and the team organised a deputyship to support him with his financial management. Childlike in presentation, with a love of soft toys, Star Wars books and puzzles which decorate his room, the service user identifies as a goth and likes to wear black makeup and nail varnish. His appearance is a risk factor as it potentially increases his risk from others. Therefore, significant consideration was given to the provider's confidence and ability to safeguard him as well as others. Fortunately, the service user settled well at the temporary placement and the provider offered a permanent home. An advocate was appointed to support the service user in his decision making, and he chose to remain at the home out of area. The team worked closely with his providers to facilitate a good working relationship and information sharing. It is important the provider feels assured in the support available to them, so they remain confident to manage the risks posed by and to the service user. To date, the service user is happy, thriving and offence-free. The team maintain regular contact with the home and will shortly undertake an annual review to monitor care, support, risk management and the service user's well-being. Back to you, Cara.
Thank you, ladies. I don't know if I'm on or not.
You are.
Good. We thought it'd be nice to share some of the views of our partner agencies with you, and these are just a few of the examples that we've received. I won't read them all because I'm aware of time factors. So we've got one here. Staff are always happy to do joint visits, and this has been helpful to have a multi-agency approach, assisting the person on probation and help both safeguard them and others. Communication is good and replies are always really swift, and that was from a prison officer. And we've got one from a care provider manager. I have particularly found that dual care planning with robust exit strategy in place is helpful. By doing this, we're working together, setting boundaries, which stop service users playing other services off against each other. So some really nice comments there. So just to talk a little bit about some of our successes. A key area of focus for the team has been to build relationships within the prison. And this has been challenging at both prisons due to the frequent changes in leadership within the prisons and the health providers. We have made some progress at HMP Humber and have recently secured a dedicated office space with internet access, which facilitates the team working on site, thereby increasing presence and profile and efficient use of time. Cohesive working in prison is really worthy of acknowledgement as a key achievement. As stated earlier, this was quite poor with low referral rates pre the prisons and MAPPA team. The team have delivered informal training to prison officers on safeguarding and the Care Act to better support understanding and create positive relationships and support appropriate referrals. The success of this is evident in the number of referrals and general inquiries received. The senior social worker attends weekly safer custody meetings to raise the profile of the service, contributes to the care of prisoners and identify individuals who may have slipped through the net. The team are also responsible for delivering training to the health provider and management teams. In recognition that the prisoners are the eyes and ears of the establishment, the team have met with prisoner groups, i.e. the pilots and the Over 50s Club, to raise awareness of social care in custody. There are plans to deliver further awareness training to other minority groups such as LGBTQ and learning disability. As is evident in the early graphs, the significant increase in referrals since the inception of the team. East Riding's participation in MAPPA panels ensures cohesive working, early alerts and release planning for eligible MAPPA offenders, and attendance at MAPPA panel ensures that we are fulfilling our duties and meeting eligible need. The effectiveness is evidenced in our oversight of the cases and in delivery of safe and effective support in conjunction with our partners in probation and forensic services. The team also provides support and work collaboratively with other adult specialist services, for example Futures Plus, who are a learning disability, autism and preparing for adulthood service, ensuring service users are provided with a robust wraparound support and care. Expansion on this success is planned, and I'll talk more about that later. Whilst historically it's been difficult to secure accommodation and support from community providers, the team have forged a good working relationship with one specific local provider, and we hope to build on this success to secure additional accommodation moving forward. There is now a regional network group specifically for prison social workers, and this group was created by our senior social worker and provides a space for peer support across Yorkshire and Humber regions. Colleagues have opportunity to share best practice, information, news and resources. This group has facilitated cohesive working between local authorities engaged in out-of-area release planning. This cohesive working supports better outcomes for our client group, many of whom have no support networks in the community and are significantly out of touch with the fast-paced modern world. So in terms of areas of progress, the team offer opportunities to East Riding colleagues to shadow the team in their work, so in terms, supporting it with inductions and assessed year in employment. 2 of the team members are level 2 practice educators and contribute to the development of future practitioners by providing long-arm practice education services to trainee social workers. We have active involvement in the ADAS Forensic Network and the Yorkshire and Humber Social Care Review to support standardised practice locally and nationally within the prisons. We've creating positive relationships with specialist care providers within the authority. It's small steps, but it's still a step in the right direction, and one we hope to utilise to increase confidence with other providers. We have cohesive working with partner agencies, and we've forged links and good relationships with services such as housing, charities, community and specialist police services. We work closely with MAPPA, which is the management of sexual offenders and violent offenders, to support individuals sentenced in later life for historic sexual offenders or being released having served lengthy sentences in custody. As we've previously identified, serving prisoners age more quickly than their peers in the community. I'm not going to talk through each of these, but just to give you a little bit of a flavour. It's difficult. One of the things we found difficulty with is organising adaptations. Due to strict prison processes, there are missed opportunities to actually implement aids and adaptations to support people to manage independently. There's also missed opportunities to work with people with learning disabilities or difficulties and or neurodivergence. This is for a wide variety of reasons, included but not limited to lack of diagnosis, non-disclosure and limited time in custody. The senior social worker is in discussions with HMP Humber's neurodivergent support manager to formulate strategies to avoid prisoners slipping through the net. It's difficult to anticipate the impact of the team of the proposed expansion of HMP Humber and the additional prison next to Fort Sutton. As we mentioned earlier, we're starting work to review the staffing of the team, and we'll be using the current data to predict and inform future needs of the team, with the aim of increasing staff numbers and admin and looking at budgetary support on this. As I mentioned earlier, the view of the general public can be quite extreme, and when care needs for people in prison is mentioned, this attitude does cross over to some providers, and one staff member was called disgusting for suggesting that someone with offending history of sexual offenders be considered for residential care. Most just confirm that they have no vacancy or do not feel that they can meet a person's needs. How we resolve this is a real challenge. The team are working with providers to support them to deliver services, as you can see from the case studies, with positive effect. We do need to build on this, and there is some optimism that by working in partnership with providers, we can ease fear, challenge discrimination and enable more providers to feel confident in offering care provision. These are some of the priorities that we've got set out for 2023. So just to expand on a couple of these. So there's one, social supervision is a term that many of you might not have heard, but it is a role required of services for persons detained under forensic mental health detention. Currently, this is undertaken by the AMPS in East Riding, but there are plans for this to be expanded to the prisons and MAPPA team. Co-production is not a new concept. It's vital that we work with the prisons and the residents to co-produce our services to ensure that needs are met. East Riding employs a co-production lead, Peter Measures, to support with this. And as stated earlier, the team do work with the pilot and over 50s groups and have plans to engage further with other groups. The support from people with lived experience is vital in understanding, within the limitations of the prison environment, what support people want both behind and beyond the gate. Co-production in the prisons is still in its infancy, but something we are committed to progressing. Perhaps the most challenging issue in terms of service provision is for people with learning who are leaving. Sorry, let's start that again. Perhaps the most challenging issue is in terms of service provision for people leaving prison. I think it's fair to say that this is especially challenging for people with a history of violent or sexual offences. Care providers are not trained or confident in supporting this in the community. Residential providers are particularly cautious, and with good reason. They care for the most vulnerable people in our communities, and often people who would not be able to protect themselves from harm. On one occasion, as was stated, 70 providers were contracted to try and arrange support for somebody who was in need of residential care. And there has been a recent legal case where a female resident was sexually assaulted by an ex-offender, which I'm sure you will appreciate caused significant anxiety for providers. There is a real need nationally to develop the market for ex-offenders and work to create safe placements. I don't know what the solution is to this as yet, but we are working on it. Many of the changes are dependent on developments within the private sector and beyond our control, hence this being a long-term goal despite the immediacy of need. Domiciliary care is equally but differently challenging. Again, many providers are reluctant to provide home care. We're frequently required to commission over and above the eligible need to manage risk. We've got learning disability on there with 28.6% of all people in the UK is reported as having a learning disability and or autism, and 15 to 20% of people worldwide are reported as neurodivergent. So this is quite a significant number of people, especially when it's considered against the prison population, which, assuming it's representative of the general population, equates to approximately 486 people who potentially have a learning disability or autism. We currently have 0 referred to us with these diagnoses, which is shocking and sadly not just a local issue. The underreporting of learning disability and autism is certainly a regional, if not national, issue, and one we must work in partnership to resolve. We have had conversations with the prisons in regard to how their intake assessments could be used to identify this and or social care need and support early referral. Our team have identified a number of individuals with neurodiversity, some diagnosed and some not, and we will be completing scoping work in conjunction with health partners and people with lived experience over the coming months to identify how we progress this and work in partnership with the prisons to achieve this outcome. We are fortunate to have an autism engagement officer in post, Angel Forsyth. Her role is to develop autism-friendly communities and support people with neurodiversity to have a voice and to work in partnership with people with lived experience and private and public and voluntary sector services. This work in the prisons is in very early stages, but we are optimistic that we will be able to achieve outcomes. And in terms of hospitals, yes, people do go into hospital. We have real issues with people being admitted and discharged before we even know that they've been unwell, but we are hoping to work with our hospital teams in order to try and seek some resolution to that. I do hope you've all enjoyed this presentation and can see the benefits of having a MAPPA team. We are very proud of what we've achieved and what we've identified for future development. It may feel that we've got a long way to go, but every journey begins with the first step. Huge thank you to Dawn and Fiona for giving up their time to share case studies, and thank you all for taking the time to listen.